Hello, everyone. Welcome to Yesshift, and this is another Steven's Vinyl Adventures episode. It looks like lately I've been able to do, discussion of one record per week or one Steven's Vinyl Adventures episode per week, and I'm gonna be continuing that into next week and the week after. For next week on the 15th, I believe, um, and scheduled for I think noon Pacific that day, but I might do a little bit earlier, depending on how free I end up becoming after taking care of some things. Then um, today I'm talking about the Frost album Life in the Wires, which came out almost a year ago. And on the 15th, I'll actually be talking about two different things, kind of a double feature type deal, talking about Foghat's Full for the City, since there's a 50th anniversary edition, and finally Gentle Giants playing the complete live experience. And been meaning to talk about that one for a while, but it just seemed really nice given that they both have full in the title, and they will also sort of tie in nicely to some other stuff going on later this month, as on September 17th at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern US time, 8 p.m. UK time, there will be a Drum Talk TV Brilliance online fan Q&A with Foghat drummer Roger Earl. So people will be able to watch the Q&A session and perhaps even ask Roger himself a question on screen, on camera, uh, and get involved with that, to be able to watch that Q&A portion of the stream and try to ask a question, you go to drumtalktvbrilliance.com and either get the gig pass option, which is just for that particular online event, or become a premium member. So go check that out. And as for Gentle Giant, what we have going on later this month is on the 25th of September, of course, at I believe noon Pacific, if I remember correctly. Let me just double check that. We're gonna have Derek Schulman again, but on Yesshift. So that full interview will be here on Yesshift, and we'll be talking with him about his new memoir, Giant Steps. So yeah, that will be on the 25th at noon Pacific. And Derek Schulman was in Gentle Giant, was a record executive. We had him on the show before a while back. He talked a little bit about that period when Yes we're kind of going through that transitional period before the whole union thing. So yeah, it seems like a good time to talk about those. And then on the 23rd, I believe also at noon Pacific, I'll be talking about a vinyl record then as well, though it'll depend on if it arrives on time. So yeah, I'll keep you posted on that. And I guess we'll see if I'm able to maintain that sort of release schedule for these Stevens Vinyl Adventures episodes. Like if it could keep being a somewhat weekly thing, or maybe it could be like just I'm able to do them more frequently lately, and maybe other stuff will come up and I'll have to pick and choose when I can do these. But yeah, so let's get into it. So this is kind of a funny story how I ended up getting this album. So back in, I think this was in like top of the year, I had previously ordered the Jethro Tull Christmas album for dad, and it was taking a while for that to ship. And I inquired about it, and so they, you know doing the typical customer service thing of like, there have been delays, yada yada yada. Here's a discount code in the meantime, and so I'm like, okay, so what do I want to get? And I think this was around the time we were, anticipating. Um, what was this around when Steve Hackett's new album came out, or it might have been, but yeah, there's some Steve Hackett stuff going on, activities. Actually, maybe it was around the time I we saw the news of the live Magic at Trading Boundaries thing. It was one of those things, and so thinking about Steve Hackett's band and Craig Blundell, the drummer, being part of that live band. Having seen him in concert, and also we had him on Yesshift and Drum Talk TV a while back. So I was like, you know what? I've listened to some of the Frost material before that interview with Craig a while back, and that sounded pretty good. I want to check out this newer Frost album, which had come out October of 2024. And I think I've mentioned this before, but recently it was announced that Craig would no longer be the live drummer for Steve Hackett, but that he would continue being an integral part of the recording of future stuff in the studio, from what I understand from that press release that was recent. So, yeah, I went ahead and ordered Frost Life in the Wires. And this is something I've been meaning to talk about for quite a while, and now and then I've been close to, not even just talking about it, but just listening to it. And before I know it, 7 months have gone by. This is I got this back in February. It's September now, and that's really embarrassing that I let so much time pass without checking it out. And I've even got I've at least a couple CDs and maybe a DVD, music related stuff. Actually, more than just that amount, where more than just a couple, where um, I've been meaning to check them out, but it's just just been so much going on this year. But gradually, I'm making my way through stuff. But anyway, so what's funny about another funny thing about this album is, I've had it for all these months, and then I get around to listening to it finally, and it's only then, upon reading about it, that I realize that it's a continuation of the album that came before. So, uh, yeah, like I had all this time to look into that, enough time to have gotten the album before and listened to that first, and I didn't know, and so ended up not doing that. But yeah, apparently the concept of this album continues from Day and Age, their 2021 album, which clocked in at 53 minutes, whereas this one is a double album, with one disc being uh 42 and a half and the other being almost 43 and a half, so a bit longer. So from what I understand, the final track of the album before this one, Day and Age, sort of the ending of that continues into the beginning of this. So that kind of reminds me of other bands that, there have been concept albums that have kind of done something like that. So first off, I'll go ahead and show you how it looks. So this is the album cover. It's really eye-catching the way it has that radio. And the concept is about a character named, I don't know if it's pronounced Nayo or Nayo. It's about Naio, but that's pretty much the character that we follow. And there are like little bits of info on the lyrics sheet. I'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, on the back, we got the track list here. So on side one, we have Sky Waving, Life in the Wires, part one, This House of Winter, the Solid State Orchestra. And then on side 2, we have Evaporator, Strange World, Idiot Box, and Absent Friends. Side 3, we have School, introducing the All-Seeing Eye. Propagander. What's funny about that title is without reading the title of that song, at some point within the past day, I was thinking about the word propaganda because of a post I saw, and I thought to myself, that kind of sounds like propaganda now that I think about it. So that's a weird coincidence there. Sign of Life, Moral and Consequence, and then side 4 has Life in the Wires Part 2 and Starting Fires. And I like how you also get the details of, this, the back of this radio thing. It's got like the model number 119, which reminds me of a scene from Twin Peaks: The Return where this woman who is not well keeps shouting 119. So yeah, it's interesting. And 240 volts and stuff like that. So yeah, I quite like how this looks. I'll go ahead and show you the inside as well. Yeah, making sure that everything stays inside. But yeah, the photography looks really good. I feel like, I always feel like showing these on the webcam doesn't necessarily do it justice, but yeah, we have the credits here. The photography and graphic design are by Carl Glover at Olive Studio. And the lineup on this album, like I mentioned, Craig Blundell is on this, but you also have John Mitchell on guitar and vocals. John, of course, has been part of the Current Asia lineup and has worked with John Wetton in the past. And on keyboards, guitars, and vocals, we have Jem Godfrey. And on bass and vocals, we have Nathan King. And these are written by Jem Godfrey, except Strange World and Starting Fires, written by Godfrey and Mitchell. And right here it says the voice of Livewire is Herman Endymion. Is that how you pronounce it? Recorded and mixed at The Cube from January to May 2024. That's an interesting name for a studio. Produced by Jem Godfrey, mastered by Peter Van Riet at Fine Tune. And, they do the special thanks and whatnot. So very neat stuff. And I'll show you the records as well before talking about what I think of the material, the music and such. So yeah. Oh, I'm just noticing now, like at the bottom of the radio, you also see the word minstrel and battery electric. So I like that detail right there. And like I said, this is a concept album, so it involves that character in this, I guess, futuristic world that uses AI and whatnot. And he finds this radio, and it's kind of like an awakening and whatnot. Okay, there we go. Okay, so yeah, it's black. So take out the disc. All right, this is side 1. Got side 2. Yeah, the center of side 1 is basically the center of the, I don't know what you call it, the inner gatefold. I think that's what it's called. What I showed you earlier when I opened up the thing, it's got the smoke. Whereas what's on the illustration or photo, I guess I should say, I don't know if it's a photo or a graphic, but it looks like wires themselves that are part of the radio. So I think that's an interesting thing right there. I don't know if I gave quite a good look at that, like the center of that. So I don't know how well it shows up on here necessarily, but yeah. All right, now we'll show the second disc. What I think is really cool is that even though this is considered, a vintage format style, vinyl and the packaging and whatnot, it's still, and the concept even talking about radio, it still feels very new, very modern, very now. So we have side 3. Trying to figure out what it is. It kind of reminds, I think it might be an eyeball. It kind of reminds me of the eyeball from like Pink Floyd's Pulse album. I think that's the album and live video it was on. And side 4, and again, I can't help but think of concept albums like The Wall and whatnot when checking out these types of concept albums. The middle of the side 4 disc also has like this bit of a radio. I think it's got like these mechanical bits. So I really like the commitment to the theme. It's not just in the music, it's also part of the visual elements of this. And we got the lyrics sheet, which goes behind the first disc packaging in the the first of these sleeves and the thing that opens. Yeah, so this is how the lyrics sheet looks. It looks kind of like a blueprint. You got these light blue lines that very much look like a blueprint of a radio or something. And the beginning of each of these songs, on the lyric sheet, but under the title, it sheds a bit of context of what's going on. Stuff that's going on with this main character. And there's even one where it says even a villain needs an origin story. And so you figure, okay, I guess this song is supposed to be talking about the villain's origin. What's interesting is even though this album tells a story, even though concept albums tell, a story that's more continuous and supposed to be one thing, and they try to make it coherent and whatnot, I don't feel like the experience is spoiled by me not having heard the album before this that this continues from, because the music is what's the surprise, and you can't really spoil that surprise for people, even if they've heard snippets of the music, samples and whatnot. They still don't have the full context, and you can't really spoil like what happens in the story or in the music by just sampling bits here and there. And that's why sometimes I think music is a bit more of a I don't know if pure is the right word, but a bit more of a transcendent form of art or media than say film or TV in that respect, because with those formats you can spoil something for someone and they can still watch and try to enjoy, but some of the surprise is kind of gone there for certain huge reveals and whatnot. So that's something, kind of a thought-provoking thing that this album reminded me of. I don't feel like I'm shortchanged by not having listened to the album before this. Um, if anything, it makes me more curious about the album before this one. Like I said, I've listened to Frost material, but the music that included Craig on it, and he wasn't on the album before this one. He was with them on others. So, and I think this is a great band. They are prog and they're also heavy. So I guess I don't know if you would consider them prog metal, but some of the material, they go by the same speed that you might expect from something like Rush, and they can be prog metal at times. So, and I can't help but think of Clockwork Angels by Rush when comparing this concept album. The journey that this character goes on. And in between songs, and I should say these songs really do nicely segue into each other, reinforcing that it's a continuous narrative. But in between songs, you'd also get a voice on the radio. So that kind of reminds me of the Who Sellout, except it's not just those funny commercials. It fits well with the tone of this album, which feels like it has a sense of urgency. So my favorite track on this might be Evaporator. That one like really stood out. Um, all these tracks are pretty good, but I think that's the one where I'm like, yeah, I think this might be my top one for this album. There's a really good balance between the heavier, chaotic tracks and the quieter ones. Like you'll go from one heavy track and then it'll sort of uh, I don't know, kind of easy win by playing a quieter one before you get into the next heavy one. So very masterfully done here. The song Idiot Box has a lyric where it's like, welcome to the show where no one listens. And I couldn't help but think of Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Carnival 9 when reading that and hearing that lyric. In fact, much of the keyboards, especially later in the album, kind of remind me of some of the keyboard work in Carnival 9. That type of sound. That that type of thing. Um, and I'm just looking at my notes right now. After the song "Absent Friends," we have the message, "We'll be right back after these messages," and I think that's at the end of a side of the uh, album, like one of the discs. So yeah, that's at the end of side 2, so the end of the first disc. And you don't get a commercial like those goofy ones on the Who Sellout, and that's not to slight what's on that album. I think those commercials have a charm to them. It's a fun concept. But yeah, I thought it was kind of neat that the disc ends with "We'll be back after these messages," and you sort of don't hear any messages, but it's basically there at the point when you have to uh, take the disc off of the record player and put in the next disc. And I guess the same could be said about the CD format. It would have to be 2 CDs, I would think, because what's the most that CD can go up to? Is it 80 minutes? Because he got 42 and 43 minute discs here, and I imagine they would still try splitting it down the middle, maybe. Let me look that up, actually. Life in the Wires Frost CD. Okay, yeah, it is a 2 CD thing. All right. And the lyrics for School, going back to this lyric sheet, one of the tracks, the first track on the second disc, is titled School, Introducing the All-Seeing Eye. And it has these lyrics that look very repetitive. Like you get, I don't know, maybe 10 or a dozen lines of "Do you like school? Do you like school?" and "I don't want to be alone in the darkness anymore." A bunch of lines that say the same thing. a bunch of lines that say "I'm so high" or "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry," and you do get other stuff in between, like "Who do you believe?" So yeah, you could see through me. You could see I'm too hot and I'll walk away. And what was kind of throwing me off guard is listening to this track, School. I was listening to it, the instrumentation and all that, and the track passes by, and I'm like, where are the lyrics? Why aren't I hearing any singing? But when reading the credits on the inside of this, it says AI generated poetry on School by uh, lyrics Mathagati, and it's like, oh, okay, so I guess those lyrics are, I guess it's just a poem that they put on the lyrics sheet for context while you're listening to School, and it ties into the theme of AI that is part of the concept of this story. So yeah, AI is a very complicated matter, the effects that it can have. And interestingly enough, Roger Dean, during the recent Trading Boundaries stream, someone did ask him what he thought about AI. And he said that, it can be, I think he said something along the lines of it can be useful when it can be controlled. But of course, there are some, I guess it depends on how people use it. There might be some who would use AI that, um, like, don't use AI to incorporate art that gets stolen from other creators and whatnot. There might be some simple things that AI can be useful for, but there are definitely some things where it's like, yeah, you don't want to use AI for this or that. So it's a whole issue that I'm sure everyone has their thoughts on. And when it comes to music, I definitely do not want AI generated music to overtake, the actual act of a person going through the process of creating the music, because there's something more magical about that. Person gets inspired to tell their story and put it to words, put it to music, playing the instrument, and or getting other people to play the instruments. um and same with, a painting. There's really wonderful things about Roger Dean's paintings, and seeing him do that in action, just making a whole painting in an hour. And the act looks very therapeutic when he does it. So and I'm a novelist. I don't know how many viewers, listeners know that I'm a self-published novelist, and I enjoy trying to come up with a story myself. I would never use any uh app or whatever that could come up with a story from a prompt, and I wouldn't like put that into um my own work. I want it to come straight from me and to feel like I've managed. There are these scenes that come to mind, and I'm trying to figure out how those and the characters can be put together in a coherent fashion, and it feels rewarding when I feel like I've put all the pieces together. So yeah, this album, Life in the Wires, very, very strong, powerful sound, and definitely worth checking out. Again, Frost is one of those more modern, more recent bands where you don't know, or where I feel like on this podcast we tend to talk about a lot of classic bands, heritage bands, but there are those more modern, more recent ones that really do have a huge sound and musicianship. And it's like, yeah, we need to keep an eye on these newer groups, not just the older ones that we might be super used to. Be sure to broaden your horizons and whatnot. But yeah, that's I guess that's all I have on Frost Life in the Wires. And like I said, I'll be doing another one of these on September 15th. So keep an eye out for that. Talk about Foghat and Gentle Giant then. And if there's any big news that comes out between now and then, I might do another news desk edition. We'll see what happens. But thanks for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.